If there was a racetrack, my guest, Rich O'Connor, is probably there. If it's an oval track, he's probably there. It could be a horse, it could be a human, it could be a car. Rich O'Connor, an Emmy Award winning machine, has worked with NBC, has worked with Car Hughes with their production team. The list goes on. Olympics. We are going to go around the world of his life, play that game here, and tell his story on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Also do track and field broadcasting and other live events. This is going to be a lot of fun, Rich, as I welcome you on, because as I throw you my first question, I notice, and I've listened to some of your prior interviews, and you've used some sports cliches for athletes to sort of better describe your outlook on the business. For one, we always hear for an athlete to let it come to them, let the game come to them. And that's how you get the best out of yourself. I heard that your production philosophy is to let the race come to your production team. Just how does that sort of work for you and that philosophy?
Well, Bryan, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm humbled because I've seen a lot of the people that you've talked to, a lot of whom I've worked for and worked with, and it's great to catch up with them that way. So I'm humbled that to be a part of that group. I think what's interesting, what I learned quickly about racing, and it goes into any show you do, is you go in with a plan, you go in with a format, but with racings, say it's IndyCar, for the Indy 500, you have 33 different stories going on at the track at any given time. So you just sort of have to follow the flow as it goes and be able to adjust and tell those stories. It was interesting doing Formula One with NBC, because what was different about Formula One was, even if there was a battle for 12th place out of 22 cars, you really learned quickly about the inner team rivalries, and why that battle meant so much, and why those two drivers were fighting tooth and nail to with 20 to go between each other. So that's why you just have to sort of learn to adapt and sort of throw the format out the window and just go with your instincts and follow what's going on.
You use the motto, which we just mentioned. Your production philosophy is let the race come to the production team. But there's another motto that I know you go by and that you've talked about, and in mentioning the pressure that comes with putting on a broadcast, and that is you only get one chance to make a first impression. Now, you have made a lot of great first impressions, but why do you take that mentality into broadcast, and how has it helped you be the best version of yourself?
You really have to over prepare. I mean, you have to go, again, I was just saying that you have to have a format, you have to have a plan. Obviously you have to. And you just, you have to know every plan, every instinct, every athlete, every scenario that could come up, so that when it does come up, you can try and adjust as quickly as possible. Because like you said, that moment passes, and you haven't really executed it, it's gone. Now, sometimes that's a blessing as well. It's nice in live television, and that's something you have to learn to accept too. Is we all make mistakes, or we don't all react to things the right way the first time, and you walk away from that show, and you're ultimately the person who feels the worst about it. But that sometimes is a positive about live television, is that you need to learn to let that go a little bit and just be better prepared for the next time around.
Yeah, it's so easy in this business to want to beat yourself up and be that perfectionist. No broadcast is perfect. You do the best you can, and obviously your resume and work speaks for itself. Rich O'Connor is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. If I were to meet you as an intern in 1984, or working the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, or even just just graduating college in 1984 at the New York Institute of Technology, If I were to hear your perspective on the business, why would I be fully confident in you that you would have the staying power all these years later in the business?
Um, I think I was interested in everything because I also really didn't know what to expect. And I also, you know, I got involved as a runner with ABC in 1983, and the first shows I did were the college football studio show on Saturday nights. And I didn't truly know. I didn't know, one, I wanted to be a producer, or two, I wanted to be a director. I was sort of feeling everything out, and I tried to be as curious as possible. Um, at that point, um, I think people sometimes when they first meet me, I can, I'm not the most outgoing person, but I try to witness a lot and take it all in, and then where I feel comfortable, investigate a little bit more. And one of the things that was interesting in Sarajevo was, where I worked in Sarajevo was very close to the research room. And back in those Olympic days, on a weeknight, you were only on for 3 hours, unlike today. So there was a little bit of time to, in the morning, go hang out with people, or get to know them a little bit better. And I spent a lot of time in the research room, and that made an immediate impression on me. Wow, that's really cool that there's a group of people that they combine a lot of information and on each of the athletes, and distribute that to everybody who needs it. And that ultimately led me to, boy, that would be interesting to do. And then an opportunity came up in 1986 with Turner Sports, when they were getting ready to do the first Goodwill Games in the Soviet Union, and they were hiring 6 researchers. And ironically, one of the people who was doing the hiring was a researcher in Sarajevo. So I was able to track him down. And that's what led me to go work on the Goodwill Games. And by that time, I had really, between Sarajevo and working Los Angeles, and I always had a love for the Olympics from watching the first Olympics. I can remember on television 1972. I always had a love for the Olympics, and all of a sudden that kind of funneled into, wow, I'd like to try and stay in this avenue for as long as I can.
From Sarajevo, and then what I hear from you is really telling of your career. You're a great listener, and that, on top of that, with your love of learning, your curiosity, that really has sparked your career and has given it the longevity that it is enjoying, to a point where I want to hear about the curiosity and the research and the love of learning that it took for you to get into curling and to work in that sport with the Olympics in Beijing, and how you use the word preparation and research a lot in this conversation, how those were put to the test, and how you were able to make the most of that.
Well, I mean, specifically with curling, again, if it's an Olympic sport, there's I'm already curious about why it's an Olympic sport, and some of its history, and ironically, when I was working for TWI, after the Goodwill Games, I moved out to LA to TWI. They used to produce a series of Olympic preview shows. In this case, it was the Road to Calgary and the Road to Seoul. And I did all the research on those shows, and eventually got to go in some of the feature shoots and whatnot. But curling was a demonstration sport going into Calgary, and there were some really interesting stories about some of the athletes, especially on the Canadian side, who were going to take part in those Olympic Games. So again, right, it's an Olympic sport already. I'm curious. Several Winter Olympics happen in between, and I know enough about most Olympic sports and what happens. Not to the point where I can answer a lot of trivia on the spot, but just enough to kind of know, oh yeah, that's right, so and so did well in that sport in that Olympic Games. And then getting involved with Car Hughes within the last year. It's pretty much been just about a year now when I became full-time with them. But still, one of the first things I did after I became full-time with Car Hughes was I went off to the Tokyo Olympics to work on those. And then once I got back, really one of the first shows we worked on was Curling Night in America, which is something that Car Hughes has done with NBC for, I think it's about 10 years now. And what we did was we went to Irvine. We went out to Irvine to the ice center there, and we taped 9 days of competition and edited them into 9 weeks worth of programming for NBC. And then right after that, we did those shows as a lead up to the curling trials, the Olympic curling trials. And Car Hughes also packaged the curling trials. So I was fortunate enough to come into Car Hughes when they were in the middle of producing 6 or 7 different Olympic trials for NBC, and mixed doubles curling and the regular curling trials were among the first that we did. So it just all sort of led into a scenario where when NBC was talking to me about having a role for the Beijing Games in Stanford, they said, "Oh, we're thinking about having you do the CNBC show." And I said, "That's great. What's on the CNBC show?" "Well, it's mostly curling." So it really came into place, and it was a fun Olympic Games, and to watch watch shot by shot everything come together in that competition.
Why is it fun working with you?
I don't know. I don't know that it's always fun, but I try. I mean, I think you hit something earlier. I mean, I definitely do try and listen. We all get busy. We all get very busy. I try and if I'm not listening, at least be aware of things that are going on with the production team. We've all been involved with production teams that were not fun to work with, and mostly teams that are fun to work with. And so you just you take those experiences and say, what have I learned over the years that works, and you get the most out of your team, and you try and steer it that way. And especially when you're doing a season with a team that involves 10, 15, 20, even more weeks on the road with certain production teams, then you just try and carve out little things that you can do together where you get away from the competition. Whenever we would do a race at Road America, Wisconsin, if the opportunity presented itself, we'd rent a pontoon boat for an hour and just go out before sunset and just relax, take in. If you're going to travel that much, you have to take in some of the local scenery when you can.
Speaking of taking in, you yourself walked a lap at the Indy 500. In going back to that moment, what are you listening for, and what are all of your 5 senses taking in?
So I didn't actually walk the track until 2019 when NBC had picked up the broadcast rights to the entire package, which for the first time was including the Indy 500. And so I think I got there 2.5 weeks before the race itself, because we were doing the road course race the first weekend, qualifying the second weekend. So I think it was the Tuesday or Wednesday, 2.5 weeks out, and about 6 o'clock, nobody was there, and that's when I walked it, I let it take a couple of hours to walk side by side. And I was just, I was just looking for every little thing that really, how special that place is, but to have the opportunity to really investigate it, and that's too strong a word. I was just taking it all in, but just to see it, and really the sense of sight is really what gets overwhelmed the most, because when you stand in certain places, what really stood out to me is the size of the speedway, but knowing how quickly the cars cover that distance. That's pretty impressive.
How much time, Rich, have you let yourself take in what you've done over the course of your career?
Probably not much, but I do realize that I have had chances to think about where I've been. I grew up. I remember being 9, 10 years old, and I was a big fan of Wide World of Sports. And again, no DVR, nothing to record on in those days. So I was a 10-year-old that when Wide World was on, I would come in the house and watch television. And so a lot of times I can remember watching Wide World of Sports events, those marquee events, and what made them special. And at that point, that's how, in my mind, that's how I traveled the world, was getting to see them do these scene sets in exotic places. The Harlem Globetrotters travel internationally, and that sort of thing, and watch them do athlete profiles in these small towns from around the world. And I never really imagined that watching those shows that would be me. And ultimately, a lot of the events that have been on Wide World of Sports, I've been fortunate enough to work on, whether it's been the British Open, or the Tour de France, or the Kentucky Derby, 16 Olympics. I've been fortunate to work on great events and travel to a lot of places around the world.
Another show that you've been fortunate to work on, American Gladiators. How, in one way, one little bit, can you resemble gladiator-like qualities as you've made this career and turned it into something really neat?
Oh gosh, gladiator type qualities. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, there's the common thread with gladiators, like anything else, are stories. So when I moved out to Los Angeles for the road to Calgary and the road to Seoul, it was an 18-month assignment, and then that was supposed to be it. And when we were finishing Road to Seoul, my boss out in LA came to me. He said, "I just want you to know, when you get back from Seoul, come back to the office. You're full-time freelance. We'll find things for you to do." Great. So get back from the Olympics, and report to work, and they said, "So here's the thing. We have this thing coming up, American Gladiators," and they showed me some tape or I went and looked at some tape on a pilot that had been done, and I was like, "No way." Earlier in the year, I was a runner at the first Super Bowl I had ever been a part of. It was down in San Diego that year. So in 1988, I had worked at a Super Bowl. I had done 2 Olympics, and that's what I pretty much said. I was like, "No, I don't want to work on American Gladiators. I want to work on other types of things." And they said, "Well, if this is what we have for you." And it turned out to be a great experience. One, because it was very hands-on, with a small group of people. We got to go on. We didn't pick the gladiators. Other people picked the gladiators, but we got to go on nationwide contestant searches, and have input onto who some of the contestants would be. We got to work on some of the games and events. that were involved. And in the later seasons, I think I worked on 5 seasons within 3 years or something like that. Um, Eventually I did a lot of work with the contestants. I would draw up a rule book, I would draw up a scorecard, get to know their stories a little bit better. And that's ultimately what was very appealing to it, was that, like any athlete out there, everybody that would show up to LA to take part in Gladiators, they had some sort of story.
And you listened to that story, which made you appealing to them. Rich O'Connor is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. In learning about those subjects which you're putting on screen, whether it's the contestants of American Gladiators, whether it's an IndyCar race, whether it's track and field with Car Hughes and NBC and beyond, how have you found you yourself, Rich, most emotionally relating to the subjects you cover?
It's, you have to, again, it's relationships, it's trust. Some people you can sit down with, and in 10 minutes, you realize you're probably not going to get a lot of information, and they're not necessarily willing to give you a lot of information. And you can't blame them. Again, sitting across from somebody that they've never met, that can be difficult. But if you get a second opportunity to do so at another event down the road, or a third opportunity, it's just building trust and building relationships.
The relationships you have with your 3 kids, how much do they know about everything you've done? Or you talk about your curiosity. How about their curiosity for you?
Well, it's interesting. One thing I've been very fortunate to do, and I'm grateful to NBC and various companies I have worked for, or various events I've been to, is it sort of started out. We had when my wife gave birth to our twins, we had the 3 of them were we had 3 under 2.5. So at the beginning, I used to take my older son. If the event involved just driving a car, there were a couple of times I would take him with me. I mean, the first event we went to, I took him to I was doing some bull riding for Versus, and I took him to an event in Worcester, Massachusetts. And it's great to see life through the eyes of a 4 or 5-year-old sometimes, because the things we get jaded about. We walked into the hotel room. I think it was a Quality Inn or a Holiday Inn Express or something like that. We walked into the hotel room. My son goes, "Wow, this is cool." So you're like, yeah, I guess this can be cool. So over the years, if I was able to, a couple of times a year, I would take my kids with me to an event, because I also thought, for somebody who spends a lot of time on the road, I realized the benefit was they were seeing, all right, what is Dad doing on the road? What does he do? Who does he hang out with? Who does he go to dinner with? Where does he stay? I don't know. I'd like to think that gave them a little bit of sense of I don't know, comfort or whatever. Just or like you were saying, answer their curiosity of like, well, when Dad goes away for 4 or 5 days, what's he doing? I've never actually felt like they have a curiosity of, what does Dad do so I can do it as well. I get a sense now of what they're thinking they're doing later in life, or at least know that up to this point it does not involve television. But they all like sports as well. They're not the 10-year-old or teenager I was. That was where sports was my life. But they have consistently taken part in sports. My son plays lacrosse, and my twins run track. And I think they do it just because they like to do it.
What did you miss, Rich, as a child that you're now able to experience through your own children?
That's a good question. They certainly, well, sports, for example, it's fun to see the way they approach sports. Like I said, they're not fanatics about it. I think they all take part in it because they enjoy that specific sport. Where, as I said, sports was everything to me. Maybe took it too serious at times. I tried to make my high school baseball team. I tried to make my high school basketball team. Did not make those, but played recreational or intramural just to keep sports going. So when each of them made a high school sport, I took a lot of pride in that, and I was happy for them that they were able to accomplish something that I didn't. And again, strictly for the sense of enjoyment, not necessarily meaning the same thing.
What pride did you take in getting to work with Jeff Genthner?
The thing is being asked to. So in 1997, after several, so at TWI, we did the Road to Calgary, the Road to Seoul. We did preview shows on Albertville in '92, Lillehammer in '94 for Turner, Nagano in '98 that we did for the TWI London office, distributed internationally. The funny thing too is I've been fortunate enough to work in production on 16 games. Most of the games that I haven't been able to go to because of other responsibilities with TWI, I at least got to do preview shows on and go over to the cities and shoot some material. So I've always felt the connection to the games that I didn't go to. So in the late 90s, TWI did a partnership with the USOC to do these monthly US Olympic Gold shows. Now, there was a US Olympic Gold show that Turner used to do that was more live events. This was a US Olympic Gold show that was all, athlete profiles. And really one of the things we tried to do was maybe go and tell some stories on some of the sports that weren't always getting as much attention as track and field or swimming or gymnastics. So we did those sports as well, but we also covered a lot of other sports, including curling. So I really one, anytime you get to do work for the United States Olympic Committee and their athletes, that's a huge accomplishment.
Well, Rich, as we wrap up this conversation, and as I hear you speak and how you've been driven to give attention to sports that maybe haven't gotten the recognition they deserve, this is what this conversation has been for you, in that you have done so much and you deserve more recognition and praise for what you've done. And humbly, this is my way of showing my admiration for you and what you've done and what you continue to do. And I will always go back to that over preparedness that you talked about, your curiosity, your listening, and the way in which you have pulled this off. It's inspiring, and I'm so grateful to have you on to tell your story. Rich O'Connor, I'm Bryan Fenley. Rich, so appreciative to you for your time, your openness, and telling your story.
Well, again, Bryan, thanks so much for having me, and I think you're doing a great program in capturing different aspects from different people in the business, and still great to catch up with other people in this unique way.